Thanks, Nick.
So yeah, this is a piece of short fiction inspired by a real-life neighbour, so keep that in mind. Daryl Weathers remembered the day they began building a plaza-sized Hungry Jack's on the corner of Station Street. "Welcome to Tugun," it screamed, obnoxious and red. "We love undercooked food." He knew why the road leading past the Shell petrol station and the plaza was as wide as a country road. He could tell you what day in November it was when they began construction on the local bowls club that now bordered the small park and the foodworks store. Daryl knew everything that had ever happened in Tugun, and it was all he would ever talk about. The only problem was that he could only keep one or two of these stories in his head at a time. Anything more, and his brain felt as if it were being slowly squeezed like a ripe piece of fruit. Daryl lived in an old brown brick 2-level block of flats. His mother lived in the room next to his, breathing into a tangle of machine tubes. She had filled their house with wicker furniture and plaid chairs, the kind you see in a second-hand store after someone dies. The owners let Daryl work maintenance jobs around the block so that he and his mother could stay. They had recognised early on that Daryl would need help. He was too slow to stay at school, and the sheer size of him was enough for other boys in the neighbourhood to want to start something. Daryl's legs had a mild elephantitis, so the space between the knees and his ankles inflated like puff pastry. It caused him to waddle, with a gait recognisable from a distance. Daryl's job was to wheel the neighbourhood green garbage bins back and forth through people's backyards every Thursday. Mid-morning, he would buy the paper from the corner foodworks and do the crossword on the service counter. By lunchtime, he would return home and watch some TV, pace people's front yards a little longer, and then he would settle into the lone upholstered chair in his bedroom and watch Mr. and Mrs. Clark. Daryl's bedroom was just high enough above his neighbour's retaining wall that he could see straight into their master bedroom. Newly married, the Clarks had installed security blinds on every out-facing window in their bottom floor unit. But Daryl could still see their shapes ghosting past the windows in the evening, and sometimes, when Mrs. Clark forgot to pull down the screens in the morning and Daryl crept close enough to the windows, he could see straight through into Mrs. Clark's living room. Mrs. Clark was tall for a lady, with long, slim arms and legs that maintained a pretty golden sheen all the way through winter. She sang softly in the mornings and when she was doing the dishes after breakfast. She had never taken much notice of Daryl, other than the time she'd caught him in her garden bed and he had to pretend to be pulling out weeds around her roses. The woman that came over when Mrs. Clark was away was smaller and wider than Mrs. Clark. She had dark auburn hair with a vicious streak of red dyed through it. She had sharp, fake red fingernails that she used to tear away Mr. Clark's jacket barely seconds after he had yanked his keys out of the front door. One Thursday they were engaged in their usual dance, a few glasses of red wine for her, a look of bored indifference for him. Daryl was sitting in his room, in his armchair against the window, staring down onto Mr. Clark and the woman. She was shrugging off her tacky pink leather jacket and was slowly loosening his tie. The woman kicked off her plain black heels and sat astride Mr. Clark in one unnatural motion. Daryl heard his mother shifting in the next room and inched his armchair closer to the window. Mr. Clark and the woman were undressing each other with haste now, and the floor of the bedroom was littered with clothing debris. Normally one of them would reach up for the blind and block out the light, but they were already too engrossed in each other to move. Mr. Clark was on top of the woman, his hands clenching the sheets on either side of her head. The woman lifted her chin and closed her eyes, exposing the white flesh of her throat, their bodies entwined eagerly together. When the woman began making a sound, Mr. Clark wrapped his long fingers around her neck. He wound them around her throat slowly, with his thumbs resting on the sensitive curve of her windpipe. She looked up at him with a pathetic curiosity, and then Mr. Clark squeezed, hard. The woman's eyes became large and she groped at Mr. Clark's arms, trying to get under his skin with her sharp red nails. Mr. Clark absorbed the woman's punches and shook her a few times, so hard that Daryl could see the vertebrae in her neck snap back and forth. Underneath Mr. Clark, the woman looked frozen in a frame of grotesque surprise. Mr. Clark unwound his fingers from the woman's throat and stood up. He was still naked and had to crouch down to collect his trousers from the floor. As he straightened up, he glanced toward the blind, but it was too late. Daryl was already looking directly at him, raised halfway out of his lone upholstered bedroom armchair. Thank you.